The UN estimates that by 2050 there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish.
It's estimated that 100 million tons of plastic are generated globally each year.
Local authorities have been forced to close beaches due to mounds of plastic rubbish.
Hello, I'm Tammy Ven Dange, an executive turned social entrepreneur. It's clear that Mother Nature has a plastics problem, but I think it's time to quit talking about the problem. Instead, let's talk about the solutions. This is a business podcast with an environmental mission. And as your host of the Plastics Revolution, I'm going to chat with the innovators, changemakers, and fellow entrepreneurs who are leading the way in fighting plastic waste. Along the way, we'll also share tips and practical ideas so that you too can be part of the solution. This is the Plastics Revolution. In this episode of Plastics Revolution, I chat with Chris Tangey of Ecycle Solutions, an Australian recycler of e-waste and polystyrene. Polystyrene has been a popular padding and packaging solution for a really long time. However, because it's really 98% air, it's been the bugbear of the plastics recycling industry because it's very difficult to transport it at a profitable rate. Chris and I talked about the value of this recyclable material and why they are able to provide this service when most other recyclers can't. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Plastics Revolution with Chris Tangey of Ecycle Solutions. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I learned a little bit about Ecycle Solutions when I saw some posts on LinkedIn about the recycling work that you guys were doing in polystyrene. And I was fascinated by that because I've just heard so much about the fact that it's so hard to recycle. So before we go into the nuts and bolts of how you do it, tell me more about Ecycle Solutions. What does it do and how did it get started?
Okay, I suppose it started from our parent. They are a transport and logistics business and they transport all of the new TVs, refrigerators and air conditioners, what they call big ugly freight, all around Australia to the electrical retailers, so the Harvey Normans, the Good Guys, the JB Hi-Fis and the like. And going back to 2012, what happened was that the government introduced a national TV and computer recycling scheme. And what happens is that importers have an obligation through legislation to recycle 2/3 of what it is they bring into the country. And that increases by 2% every year to the point where it gets to 80%. And they have to sign up with a co-regulator to do that, of which Ecycle Solutions was born. And so what happens is that the likes of Hisense and TCL, who our parent QLS Logistics, who they transport for, they also signed up with Ecycle. So we then go out and we secure the volume and we have collection cages at the likes of Harvey Norman because they're doing home deliveries. So they pick end-of-life units, bringing them back, and we have cages at Harvey Norman stores to collect those units, which then go and are recycled into reusable material. Greater than 90% reusable material. We're currently at about 95%. Okay. So what also happened was that the packaging needed to be recycled and the polystyrene was the problematical one, and we sourced a solution whereby it's fully recycled and is a raw material for making picture frames and skirting boards.
Yeah, okay. So, Chris, how did you get involved in Ecycle Solutions?
Well, the owner of the QLS group has been a long-term friend of mine for 20 plus years, and he just started into the National TV and Computer Recycling Scheme and polystyrene recycling, and he didn't have anyone managing the business. So I started there 2 days a week, and it was unusual that friends could work together, but it works really well. And so I started 2 days a week, and progressively, as the business grew and grew and grew, I've become full-time and got more staff now. And, yeah, it's grown significantly.
Well, I have to laugh because your LinkedIn profile actually says you're self-employed.
That is true. Because when I started out, I was looking for some work, and I was going to be a consultant. So my business is CLT Solutions, and I had about 3 clients who I had varying days. So I was 2 days with Ecycle, I was 1 day with another business, 2 days with another, and doing some casual assignments around all of that as well. So I was self-employed, but as Ecycle's grown and I became more entrenched there, I'm now pretty much full-time, but I'm not actually an employee. I'm still a self-employed contractor.
Ah, okay, so you truly are self-employed.
No, well, I was always looking for something like this. This is the best job I've had by far over my 35 years in business life, so by far.
And why do you say that?
I have a little bit of a background in the waste game, but that was more about putting it into landfill. I really like the whole idea of recycling. And what I found is that I'm working with third-party recyclers on the e-waste, and they're specialist recyclers, and they're small to medium businesses. And I'm helping their businesses to grow, and they're all growing exponentially, which has been a fantastic story. And the whole thing about the polystyrene and what it becomes, and that people are fascinated by it. So it's a good news story.
Well, for sure, that it's traditionally thought of so hard to recycle that very few councils will take it, not only here in Australia, but in other countries as well. So you guys have figured out a way to do that. I mean, obviously you had a readily available supply of it if you guys were already picking up the e-waste from major box retailers that were selling electronics and it being packaged. In fact, I'm looking at my a stack of polystyrene in my living room right now that I just had to take off of a new laser printer.
Yeah.
And it's such a pain to get rid of as a consumer.
Well, yeah, I suppose the reason why our system works is that the trucks are going to the locations where the waste is, and they've got a payload that pays for itself, as in the freight, and then they're going to return empty to the depot. So they may as well come back with end-of-life TVs.
Well, and probably a similar thing with the polystyrene, right? I mean, my understanding is that it's not so much that it can't be recycled, it's the fact that so much of it is air.
Yeah, look, it's a logistics exercise, and it's very light and a huge volume. So it's one of those things that the volume of it means that the freighting of it is expensive if you aren't doing it by reverse logistics. So if you have to send a truck out to go to an electrical retailer to just pick up polystyrene, well, the charge for that service would be too great, and that will just end up in the waste bin.
So given that you guys have these programs, are you just working with retailers and businesses to pick up this polystyrene, or are you working with councils as well?
Well, we're working with businesses mainly at the moment because we need clean, non-contaminated. So because what happens is that because it's a raw material for making a finished product like picture frames and skirting boards and outdoor furniture, it has to be clean and not contaminated. And what we mean by that is it can't be produce boxes and fish boxes, and it can't come from construction with concrete on it. It can't be dirty, can't be soiled. So it has to be, because what happens is that, one, you're being paid an export price for that product. That's locked in, and they love the quality of our raw material. So, and ours is only cropped in the ocean for what their requirement is. Some of these factories overseas employ 4,000 people. So
wow,
the amounts that we're sending them are a drop in the ocean, really. And the difficulty with councils is, you've got to de-sticker it, you've got to clean it, and they don't have those systems in place to do it. And someone's got to pay, and councils don't want to pay.
Yeah.
So what typically happens with a retailer is that a 2 cubic metre bag is $25. So you pay for the delivery of the bag. We give you a frame for you to put the bag on. and then it also pays for the collection and the recycling. But that's anywhere in Australia.
Well, that's a great price, too. For a whole bag of polystyrene and do it for $25, that's incredible.
Well, yeah, it is a good price, but the problem is that people find it expensive because if they're paying for waste to landfill based on weight, that's an expensive price, and therein lies part of the problem.
True. Down to some of the, I guess, pickups also do it by volume because, once the skip bin is full, then obviously they can't put anything else in it.
Yeah, correct, and that is attractive. So a 3 cubic metre bin would typically be about $90. So you're paying $30 a cubic. So therein, it is attractive.
I did an interview with Ryan Swenson from Officeworks. He's the head of sustainable development there, probably a couple of months ago. And he was talking about how they're trying to reduce the amount of polystyrene for their packing that they use for furniture and switch to an alternative type of material. Are you finding that some of the other companies are able to do that as well?
Yeah, when you talk to the polystyrene industry, manufacturers of polystyrene, it's not diminishing. It's not a diminishing waste stream.
Okay.
So there will be these endeavours to find other materials, but when you start to move into some of these other polyethylenes and the like, well, I don't know it's the solution. Someone else may know it, but we can't recycle that type of material. Polystyrene's got a lot of great properties about it. Great insulator, it's a protector, it's light and good thermal property.
Well, I know that they spent a lot of time trying to find an alternative, and I think they've actually moved to a paper-based packing material.
Yep.
And how they're doing it for furniture, I'm sure is probably easier than for electronics. And it doesn't sound like that's diminishing either.
No, it's not, certainly not. I think the trick to the next key, and it's really around B2B, I've been doing some work with ACT No Waste a couple of years ago, and I thought Canberra was the ideal cocoon within which to run out a model which would mean that households could recycle their polystyrene. And we talked about that in depth, and it was really about a school program whereby it would be a great education piece for primary school kids, for example, to learn about recycling and in particular polystyrene. The schools could collect it, and that would be good because kids drive behaviour in the household.
Yes.
You can imagine the kids going to school, they've got the polystyrene, they're putting it in the bag and they're finding out what then it's made into and a piece that they do around this. And it's a great way of you've got to be able to centralise where waste is collected from because it's a logistics exercise. So, and it's not a dirty waste stream, so it's a good thing to do. But someone's got to pay at the end of the day. That's the issue. There is a cost. It costs money to run trucks and to then process the waste and to buy the equipment to process it. You've got to get a gate fee.
So with all the exports that you guys do with your polystyrene, are you going to be impacted by the government ban that they've announced? And I guess it's July 2020. They've talked about banning the export of single resin or polymer plastics here in Australia for export. Is that going to impact you guys?
No, it won't. In fact, that's what the discussion with the Minister last night was to discuss the bans and just how the government are going to proceed with that. And what will happen is that you'll actually apply for a licence and you'll have to provide all your details and exactly what it is you're doing, and then you'll be approved. And so one of the issues is we actually can't export this into China because China won't take it, even though it's a raw material for a manufacturer in China. It's on the banned list in China. So a number of those operations have moved offshore into places like Malaysia and the like. So.
And then what about also, I noticed that in some states and territories like South Australia, they've already have put in bans in place, at least from a landfill perspective. I don't know how that works for consumers, but does that mean that pretty much every business there has to have a solution like what you guys are offering for their polystyrene?
Yeah, they do. And there is a company in South Australia that is providing that service, and they do a really good job. And we work with them on e-waste. And in many respects, they've adopted a lot of the things that we've been doing for a number of years, and they're a really good organisation. But having said that, you can ban it, but how effective it is another thing. That's a different set of circumstances. You've got to have a lot of eyes and ears on the ground to actually ensure that there's compliance.
Well, because otherwise they just dump it into the landfill and it's not really obvious what's in it, right?
Correct. No, that's correct. That's the problem with a lot of these programs, because people don't want to pay. It's the biggest issue around recycling, is that there is a cost to do this type of work.
Are there any processors for polystyrene here in Australia?
Look, there is. So integrated recycling, they're doing fantastic work in Mildura, where they're making railway papers out of a mix of PET and polystyrene. Stephen Webster will kill me to get the mix wrong, but they've won a government award for and so what this is doing is it replaces wood railway.
Oh, yeah. And
they've gone through years and significant research around around stress testing and the like. I was talking to Stephen about it the other day. So he's really wanting to. He's now rolling out this product to each of the states, and he's after sources of polystyrene, but he can't pay the same price that we can get for it. So that's part of that issue. But it is a good news story, and what I'm thinking is he doesn't need the A-grade stuff. So this is whereby if we could get a program together, a schools-type program, whether it's a schools program or some centralisation of polystyrene waste, then that would be something that would work really well.
Yeah, I think I interviewed Mark Yates from Replus a while back, and I'm pretty sure he mentioned that as part of some of the great innovation that's going on with the soft plastic recycling mixed into that. So, yeah, I am familiar with these sleepers, and he was a little bit envious at the time about their scale and ability to get such a large program of work out there. So, yeah, it's great to see some of these more innovative uses that can use up a lot of plastic, recycled plastic in their mix.
I've seen a lot of the Replus work, and it's really very innovative.
Yeah, they're probably the oldest soft plastic recycler in Australia. So they have plenty of expertise and knowledge on how to turn what would otherwise be considered waste into something useful. So that's a great story, too, to hear about that. You were talking about some of the uses for polystyrene once it's been recycled. So what else do people use recycled polystyrene for?
So skirting boards and picture frames. So their picture frames are really brilliant. They can make it appear as though it's a timber frame or a metal frame. They're amazing, the quality. You look at it and you go, surely that's not polystyrene, and turns around and it is.
And I think I've also heard that people are using it to make surfboards these days.
Yeah, look, it's got really durable qualities. When you take the polystyrene, as you know, you can grab it and you can snap it, and it's really quite fragile. But when you recycle it, it becomes 2% of what it was. So 4 cubic metres will make a block that is 1 foot square and about 6 inches high.
Wow.
So that's what it becomes, and it's really dense and quite heavy. That's 20 kilos in that block. So it's like a rock. So that's what it becomes. It turns into a gel when you put it through heat. So we put it through our heat extruders. It comes out like toothpaste. At 200 degrees, it comes out like a clear gel. So it's white polystyrene, but it turns to its petrochemical base.
Is it used also for insulation?
Yes, it is, yeah. Yeah, so a previous life of mine was with Fletcher Insulation, and in commercial buildings they use it for under slab, and it's used in the manufacture of caravans.
Okay.
So for insulating of caravans, because it's light and it's got good thermal properties, good insulation properties, polystyrene, and you can, there is mixed with fire retardant so that it's non-flammable.
And when they reuse it, or when they use a recycled version of it, do they use it in that more solid state, or is it still an expanded polystyrene where there's more air in it?
It's in the expanded polystyrene form, the form that you find in packaging of your TV, for example. It's in that form. So it's snappable.
Yeah. Okay.
So what they do is that the polystyrene manufacturers, they manufacture great big blocks, and then they use Windtech machines, which is a hot wire, to cut it into every shape that you can think of. So it's used for pipe insulation. It's used in underslab. They make waffle pods that go underneath concrete slabs.
Yeah, so there's so many uses for this material.
Well, the significant usage is in construction, is in the construction industry. That's 70% of polystyrene is in construction. Only 30% is in consumer-based type application.
Is that for virgin polystyrene, or is that recycled polystyrene as well?
No, that's for the uses of expanded polystyrene.
And is it hard, though, to recycle building materials?
If they're clean, then it's easy to recycle. But the difficulty is if it's being used in residential construction, for example, trying to get in and out of some of those sorts of places to collect this stuff is pretty difficult. And it's a matter of the building sites can only keep it as clean as possible. It's open to the elements and all of those types of things. So yeah, it's difficult.
So largely then the kind of polystyrene that you guys are collecting and recycling are largely from the consumer side.
Yes, that's correct. It's through the retailers. I mean, we a large retail group that were looking at introducing this to their 500 stores in Australia, and there's still plenty to go. I was talking to one of the electrical retailers the other day, and he said, I want to roll this out. We're already dealing with a number of his stores. He said, I want to roll this out right around the whole group. And we went through and we worked out that we've still got 150 stores that we could service.
Wow. It is amazing on how much waste we generate just from a packaging perspective.
Correct.
So it's great that we have some solutions like what you guys are doing right now.
Well, it is. We attend a number of expos, waste and recycling expos, and the like, trying to get the message out there. And people are fascinated because they don't understand that it actually has got a life beyond just being a waste. And they're more fascinated about what it's made into than anything else.
Well, as so many of our guests have said, it's not recycling until it is turned into something else.
Yeah, that's true.
Right now, most of us will have to just go ahead and put our polystyrene inside of the landfill bin. So it's great to know that at least you're picking up bits of it from the consumer stores that are also dealing with a lot of packaging from their products.
Yeah.
Have you guys been impacted at all by the COVID-19 preventative measures?
No, because the electrical retailers, the Harvey Normans and the like, have been open for business. We've continued to run our fleet around because freight is okay. We've still been able to get supply of product out of China for the new TVs and the like. So no, we haven't been impacted. It's touch wood. We haven't had any effect whereby nobody that we've come across has contracted the virus. So.
And what about on the demand side? Because I know that when I spoke to the Ven Dange Recycle team, they were struggling a little bit with buyers for their recycled supplies. Do you have any issues right now with the demand side of polystyrene?
Well, the issues are that the price for recycled polystyrene is beholden to the US dollar and the price of oil.
Yeah.
Because it's a petrochemical-based product. So, and it varies dramatically, that pricing. So we don't have an issue with keeping a stock of this product. It's not hazardous or non-hazardous. It's just a matter of, and we've got plenty of warehouse space, so it's just a matter of hold on till the price comes back, and then we'll get the containers going.
Well, luckily, it does look like the price of oil has gone back up.
Yeah, so we've just started moving some containers just in the last week, actually.
And I guess it makes a huge difference, too, because, like you said, you're able to compress the original size of the product down to such a minuscule portion of what it was originally that you probably can store it since you do have warehouse space.
Well, the interesting thing is that with any of these stimulus packages, what happens is people go out and when there was the shopping craze, people going out and upgrading their refrigerator and their freezer, and because they're going to be home, they upgraded their TV or bought another one for the kids or whatever. And people have obviously taken the opportunities to clean out their old ones. So if you look on our website, it'll tell you where our collection points are for e-waste, for compliant TVs, computers and printers and the like. And you can take it to that store and they'll take it for free and you don't have to buy anything. So if you don't want to wait for the council pickup, that's what you can do. And people obviously have taken the opportunity during the COVID to do a clean-up because we had our biggest collection month ever.
Wow.
Last month.
And that was specifically for the e-waste side or both? Yeah,
specifically for the e-waste, but it also translated into the polystyrene because the more sales and home deliveries and things like that happened, the collection of the waste increased on both sides.
Yes. I know you were just talking about your school program that you had in mind for trying to get consumers to also recycle their polystyrene and probably their e-waste as well. If you had any advice for businesses out there or, even for any government people that are listening, because I know we do have a few that listen to the show, what kind of advice would you want to give to them?
Well, there are two ways of recycling polystyrene at the moment, and there are businesses that are large generators of polystyrene waste and are using what is called a cold press method of recycling polystyrene. And what it does is that it squeezes all of the air out of the polystyrene and makes it into these sort of dense logs, but there's not much you can do with that once it's in that form. So a lot of that ends up going to landfill in any case. So it's sort of a bit of a pointless exercise.
So you can't recycle it?
You can. We can put it in our containers, so we can collect it from people, but you can't actually send containers full of it overseas because you can't get the weight into the container.
Yeah.
You have to be able to make the whole thing work. You have to be able to cap out the maximum weights in a container, which you can't do with cold press. So people buy these machines and then they employ labour to squeeze the life out of it, but still to put it into landfill. And a lot of places are moving away from that because it's a fairly dirty type of way of processing it because it's very friable. And so you get beads blowing everywhere and all of this type of thing. And you need a skilled operator to make it work properly. So that's something that, if I was going to advise any business that's looking at recycling, don't go down that path. I think the thing is that we know that we can provide a solution, and you're better off spending time on cleaning the polystyrene and recycling it, because at some point government are going to say you can't put this into landfill. And if you're a major operator of it, you're going to have a solution. And we just want people to know that there is a solution, and we're happy to talk to anyone around that.
That's great. If they want to learn more about your business or to reach out and touch you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, through our website, www.ecyclesolutions.net.au. There's a contact form in there, and that goes to not only myself, but I've got a marketing communications person and my EA. So,
well, we'll make sure that the contact details are in our show notes so that people can find it more easily. Well, Chris, I want to thank you for your time, first of all. And it's great to know that there are solutions available for businesses to recycle polystyrene. I mean, as I just said, as a business owner, I have so much of it, and I'm a small business. But it's good to know that there are other alternatives. It's also great to know that when you're buying a television or a printer or something that has styrofoam in it, that you can not only take your old machines back to the same retailer to be recycled properly, but also that there is a process for getting rid of the styrofoam too, because up to this point, I didn't know of any polystyrene recycler that took those types of products. So you guys were the first ones that I had heard about. And to make it a commercially viable business, it's obvious that you couldn't do it unless you had already the whole logistics system set up with your parent company.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
But it's great that, there's a lot of logistics companies out there, and you guys have taken it on your shoulders to create a more environmentally friendly system and service available for businesses. So it's fantastic to know that that's around. And thank you for that service, because otherwise there'd be a lot more plastic going into the landfill.
Well, you're right. We're probably processing the equivalent of the Sydney cricket ground filled with loose polystyrene each year. So
wow.
At least that's not going into a hole in the ground. And it's the future cost of landfills, because if you're filling it up with a recyclable material, then you'll be tapping out those holes earlier than what they need to be.
Certainly. And especially when 98% of it is actually air.
Yeah, that's right, correct.
So thank you for your time, Chris. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you, Tammy.
Cheers. Thanks for joining me for this episode. To see the links and show notes, check out plasticsrevolution.com. And if you found anything interesting or helpful at all, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the show and to tell others. Stay tuned next week as I chat to another innovator, changemaker, or fellow entrepreneur who's leading the plastics revolution. This is Tammy Ven Dange. Be kind to animals and Mother Nature. This show is produced by Johnny Pushkus. Music by Joseph McDad.